You like football, we like football, and that's why we're all here. And there's going to be some real football this weekend. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. It's Whiteout Week here on the BWI Live Show. We've got off to a hot start. Some stuff you can check out from us before we even get going. James Franklin's press conference was yesterday. I also gave my thoughts on the initial salvo of whiteout matchup conversations on Monday, but we're here to break down the rest of it. James Franklin's press conference, we're going to go between the lines. What did he say? What did he mean? Is Katron Allen the new running back one? Of course, we're going to discuss that and the whiteout game itself. Where are the places that Penn State has an advantage? We started on the one side. Now we're going to the other. But before we get to any of that, I need to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, Penn State football fans. Tailgate season is here with a 7:30 kick. Are you kidding me? All day to tailgate. Nobody gets you ready for the game like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store. Shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. I have committed cardinal sin. I have not let Nate Bauer speak in the first 90 seconds of the show. So Nate Bauer, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi. I'm great. How are you?
I from the energy level, hopefully it's keeping it at like a 85% and I haven't revved it too red. But yeah, I'm fired up this week.
Can I just soliloquy right off the bat here?
Please.
I just, listen, this is me at 100, just so everyone's aware, right? Like I get accused of not liking football. I'm excited for this weekend. I genuinely, like I woke up this morning and thought, hey, I better know what I'm talking about on this specific podcast. And I think I do, or I think I should. But like, the energy, the atmosphere, all of that stuff, the ramp up to a game like this can take even my slothish self and turn it into an enthusiast. I am geeked for the opportunity to watch two teams that I think are two of the better ones in college football perform excellence.
Right. Like a good game. A good game.
I love the idea of people doing extraordinary things, right? These are two collections of the best football players in college football. And so they get a chance in front of what will be the best or one of the best atmospheres that sports has to offer. Like that whole confluence, that whole combination is genuinely exciting and awesome. I think it's going to be great. I can't wait.
It's a big week for us as well. It's a big week for anyone associated with Penn State football. So I normally, kind of put this off to the side, but no. We're in your face about it. Subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We're going to be providing you wall-to-wall coverage, James Franklin press conferences all week, our thoughts, video breakdowns, live shows. We're giving you all the good stuff this week, and it's time for you to make the pledge, make the jump, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, because here's the thing. I've mentioned it's calorie-free before, but this isn't 2005. This is a high-protein show. We provide you all your macronutrients in one go. And if you hit the subscribe button, you're going to get everything you need to have a healthy, full, balanced Penn State football diet. Okay, Nate, your expertise is knowing what James Franklin is trying to say when he says words, so let's go between the lines.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
So we're going to get into a couple of topics today that are going to cycle throughout the show. But the first thing I want to do, Nate, is what were your overall assessments of James Franklin's personality at the podium on Monday? Because I had a conversation with somebody after the press conference. They're like, so is he always like that? And I said, yeah, for the most part. And they asked me, well, is he like that after a loss? And I said, no, not really. So what was your assessment of trying to gauge the temperature of James Franklin as a global entity in his performance in yesterday's press conference?
Boy, I think there's a danger in psychoanalyzing him specifically because I think his entire mantra and way of being is to be the same person as often as he possibly can be. That literally like the last thing that he said about practice being the same on Tuesday of FIU as it is for Tuesday of Oregon, I think is generally the same as can be expected from him on Mondays and his press conferences. So it's interesting because I had a separate, maybe tangential conversation before yesterday's press conference of what are people going to ask him about?
Yeah.
Like what's left?
Is this the first week that we get questions about the opposing team? Was usually my thought. And this is no disrespect because I do this as well. Like when we're talking about FIU or Villanova, no disrespect to those teams. They're not the story. The story this week is the game, the matchup. So people might have more of an inclination to ask about the other team.
Yeah. And I think also just a lot of the storylines that came out of the first 3 weeks of the season have already been addressed to a certain extent, right? You know about the younger players who have come on, Chaz Coleman, Darius Dixon, and I think we're going to touch on it here. Nick Singleton, some of his challenges that he's had in the first couple of weeks, Katron Allen looking good, Drew Aller, right? All of those things have been touched on in some shape or form over the first 3 weeks. And so then Penn State has this natural bye week going into this game. And it's not necessarily that it's a lot of the same stuff, but so much of, and this is inside baseball, so I apologize if I'm getting off track, but so much of the media and the reporters that cover this team have been doing it for 10 plus years, like the duration of Franklin's time at Penn State, that the conversation about not beating a top 5 team, which by the way, this is one off, even if they do it. Right. Like, it's just ground that's already been covered. And so I think that there's a significance on the backside of it to addressing it one way or the other. But before it's
because if you've asked those questions, you know the answer you're going to get. You've already used those quotes in an article before. So as much as Penn State fans, and I think this is one of the problems that certain fans want their pound of flesh in every question. They want everything to be antagonistic because of the emotions they feel when Penn State loses games like these. And I do want to address that later in the show. But our job is to get quotes, to get information out of the head coach, and to ask a question like, why haven't you beat a top 5 team, or whatever it might be, is going to get you the same answer you got 7 years ago, as Nate has pointed out. So there is I think a frustration between fans and the media of asking softball questions. But like, if you've asked tough questions and the way we phrase the questions are designed to get a response and to get words that we then use to write stories. And again, not to get into too much inside baseball, but there is like, it's not as simple as what I think Penn State fans want it to be. And that's why we do this particular show, this particular segment, to get that information on the backside and read between the lines. So let's talk about Penn State head coach James Franklin. There was some people reading text of this in exchange from Franklin that had some thoughts about what the running back conversation might be. So this is a longer first comment. This is James Franklin asked about Nick Singleton's progress and the run game as a whole.
Yeah, just like I mentioned to you guys about Katron's offseason, I think you're seeing it, right? You're seeing what we talked about, obviously his ability to go the distance, be explosive, his yards per carry, are as impressive as anybody in the country. And obviously, he's earned that. He's earned that right to be a guy that we want to get the ball into his hands as much as we possibly can. We also recognize what Nick Singleton's done over his career. And I think we talked, maybe a week ago just about, Nick has worked really hard this offseason on some things in terms of open field running and some different tools and weapons. But on Saturdays, I want him to go let it rip and play fast and powerful and explosive, which is his style. He's a downhill, full speed back. And on Saturdays, I want him to do that. So I think you're going to see that from him as well. He's been too successful for too long here at Penn State. Has had a great career, and that will continue. So I think it's a combination of him trying to be a perfect back, and you're never going to be a perfect back.
So just on time perfectly. Stephen Light in the chat says, I think it's clear that Allen is the lead back at this time for Franklin. Hope Andy Kolnicki takes that fully into account. So people hear what James Franklin just said and said, oh, it's clear that Katron Allen is now the top running back for Penn State. You buy that? Is that what you heard in that answer, Nate?
That is definitively not what I heard.
Yeah. So why? What is the reason for that?
Okay. So when he says he's been too successful for too long at Penn State, right? Had a great career. That is to me the full-throated endorsement of look, like people's performances go in waves, and that has been true of Nick's career, that has been true of Drew's career, that has been true of Katron's career.
Yep.
Right. It's ups and downs. It happens. And so he provided the explanation of both players, right? This is why Katron looks really good right now, because all the stuff that they talked about throughout the offseason being important to Katron is coming to fruition. The things that Nick, quote unquote, worked really hard on, right? All offseason, have not come to fruition yet. But he's trying to implement those things. And Franklin is very clearly saying, stop trying to implement those things. Just go be you. Go be you. Go be you. And there is this dual reality of an acknowledgement, right, on the front side that Katron is playing better than Nick, and that Nick is going through these challenges right now. And the backside of they need both. They both have to be playing at their best to win this game. This notion that, all right, whatever it was, right, 50-50 or 51-49, whatever the breakdown of snaps was for them. And yes, there's a disparity in carries, but in terms of a pure snaps opportunity, it's just not, it's not going to pivot to 75-25. That's just not the reality. And
can I ask you about two things there, though?
Yeah.
So interesting subtext within that has been, I believe, Nick Singleton has been the first play starter for the last 3 games. I believe that's true. So they're both announced as starters. They both get roughly the same amount of work. If you look at the end of the game, Katron Allen may have a few fewer carries, but in terms of total snaps in the game, they're usually bang on close to each other. Is there anything to read into? Because these guys are competing in practice every single day for the 51-49, for the 55-45. Like, there is part of this dynamic has been a mutually beneficial competition to make each other better. And Nick Singleton, it feels like right now, is pressing to round out his game and be a complete back because Katron Allen has also elevated his game. But yet we've seen Singleton take the start in these past 3 games. And generally, I feel like he has been the starter in terms of who is on the field first for a good number of these games stretching back to last year. Do you read anything into that? And does that change? Because I think even that would be signal of, obviously now Katron's the running back one if he's the guy that takes the first snap against Oregon, regardless of how the rest of the game goes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember last year, and I apologize for being unprepared on this one, but I think they may have traded some starts towards the beginning of the season, maybe, and then Nick became the right every except obviously when he was hurt.
When he was banged up, yeah.
Yeah, in October. So like this idea of who is the first one on the field, yeah, that could change, sure. But just in terms of general touches, like again, I go back to something that Franklin said it may have been the first week of the season about touches, right? This is the important thing for Penn State. And with Nick specifically, well, it's two things, right? With Katron, it's touches because you can rely on that 5 yards, right?
He's
going anywhere
yeah.
between 5 and 10 yards. He's going to get you that just about every time, literally just about every time he touches the ball.
And a positive, sorry, you nailed it. I was just going to say, no matter what, he's going to get you a positive play, even if the play in front of him is a negative one.
Totally. And that there is absolute value in that. There is also, and I understand where fan sentiment is on this. I get that you're going to recoil when I say this. Nick's ability to go for 80 has not changed.
Yeah.
Right. I just watched, the condensed highlights of last year's Oregon game. You know who was really good in that game? Nick Singleton.
Would that be Nick Singleton?
But guess what? So was Katron Allen. Right. But and they both did what they do, the things that they do. Katron with 20-yard carries, Nick breaking off a couple of 30-yarders, but this Nick involved in the passing game, which has not been a feature so far this year. Like, I just think all of those things not necessarily have been minimized in the first few weeks, like that conversation that Franklin had about hiding stuff, which we'll get to. Yeah. I just don't think that all of the things that have made Singleton as good as he has been, right? We've seen it.
Yes.
There's video evidence of it. It is very hard to remember, I think, for certain people right now. But that player is still there. And I think this combination of Nick not being at his best and Katron being at his best, Penn State is banking on Nick joining that conversation and doing so post haste. Like it has to happen, and it has to happen now.
Week. Yeah, and Rob says, I said this before, be happy with 8 yards. Don't be disappointed. It's not 18 or 28. I think the nuance and the text here, Rob, is that in the first 3 games, there was an expectation that those 8-yard runs, if he breaks a tackle, become 18-yard runs. In this game now, yes, be very happy with an 8-yard run. At the same time, you're not going to get the same push from the offensive line that you did against Villanova. So those 8-yard runs are not going to be just falling out of your pockets the same way. That's the concern is now when now it needs to be an 8-yard run when it might be a 4-yard run or a 3-yard run. That's the next level in competition, and the assurance that you saw you got to see some of this stuff from Nick Singleton. You wanted to see some of this, and the same thing with the passing game. You wanted to see some success here so that you felt like they had taken that step and they are their final form. They've evolved to the final Pokemon they're going to be before they go off to the NFL. And like, I don't think you would say that has happened yet. And that's the consternation here with Nick Singleton. And I think, Nate is right to point out that part of that is the thinking process instead of the playing process for Singleton. So this one directly relates to that other one. Sorry, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, like, he did what he did in that game last year, that Oregon game last year, without making a man miss in the open field. The stuff that they worked on all off season. Would it be nice? Would it be excellent for Nick's career, for Penn State football, for him to become that? Absolutely. Yes. There is a reason why they spent all that time doing that. He doesn't have to be that. Not right now.
We'll get to a little bit more of this, I think, later in the show. Some of the stuff that you wrote about the bye week progress and the offensive update. So there's layers to this conversation that are ongoing when it comes to where Singleton is in this order and how everyone feels. But, the bottom line being they're going to need both of these guys in this game and for the rest of the season. If you want to go see the game, it's going to cost you. I just was texting with somebody who was telling me, a friend of mine, that they got tickets to the game. Super excited. I asked, did it cost you an arm or a leg? And he replied with, "That's a pretty fair way of putting it." So if you want to go to the game, I can't guarantee you a dirt cheap price, but if you go to Game Time, college football has reached its fever pitch, and you're going to have to pay for it. But if you want to see the whiteout game, Game Time listing prices always include fees. So you know exactly where on the elbow you're going to lose to go to the game. We use them here for our, Greg uses them for the Phillies games. I use them when I want to go see the Bills. We use Game Time to get all of our needs met for our ticketing, pricing, and our things we want to go see, whether it's concerts, whatever it might be. Game Time has you covered. And by the way, if you use the promo code ON3 at checkout, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. They also have the seat view where you can see, like, okay, is this a bad seat? Am I going to get a good seat or a bad seat? Is that baked into why this might be a cheaper ticket? All-in pricing features, those are all great. I hate surprises unless they involve cake or pie. So, surprises when it buys tickets, not so much. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code ON3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download the Game Time app today. This show also brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, Penn State football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be Watch Party Legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Adidas. Under Armour, and undefeatable prices every day. Be sure to check out the Harrisburg and York locations. Fun can't lose, and neither can you when you tailgate with Academy. And you should probably be tailgating with an anti-fragile beer in your hand if you can. The problem is you can't get a growler, as much as Nate Bauer has tried. But you should definitely check them out if you're going to be here on Friday or early Saturday going down to Anti-Fragile Brewing Company in downtown State College. Nate, tell us a little more about Anti-Fragile.
It's the best beer in State College. It's on East Calder Way. If you have a designated driver, there's plenty of parking nearby. Cheesesteaks out front, Uncle John's. They also have a food truck that is up at the stadium before games, just right outside the BJC.
Right down from our tailgate show.
Right down from the tailgate show, right next to I Do Coffee. But I digress. It is fantastic. All of their offerings, it genuinely, there's an ease of saying best beer in State College when they are a sponsor. But I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I've had quite a few beers in my life. And these are genuinely always different. Always good. You can try different things. The board is always changing.
What was the one you were drinking the other day?
The names escape me, but it was number one, and also number one in my heart. So they're hazy IPAs. They have a bunch of them. They always do imperial stouts. They always have lagers. They always have. They have it all. And so I cannot Again, not sponsor related. I was literally, as you were reading the Academy Sports, I was thinking, when do we get to talk about Anti-Fragile?
Yeah, right now.
When is that coming? So yeah, no, it's an exciting place, and there's a real chance that yours truly will be there at some point this weekend.
Yeah, I'll join you. I'll join you if it's the appropriate time. But most likely I'll be having one of their kombuchas, which, by the way, they also have kombucha, which is delicious. Another thing that they brew themselves. It's not like they got somebody else's kombucha. You can get hard kombucha, and it's on tap. So if you're health conscious or you just want to go hang out with friends and maybe you don't drink beer, there's something for everybody at Anti-Fragile. This, I think, conversation has something for everybody. And we're going to go to... We're going to talk about this a bunch of different times in the show, but somebody finally asked James Franklin, "Hey, are you saving stuff for Oregon?"
One of them long-term kind of questions, right? Are you saving things? Yeah, I think you're always, I don't know if saving is the idea, but you've done some off-season studies where there's certain things that you worked on during training camp that you're planning on using using against certain opponents. And there's some things, could you have used early in the season, but you didn't feel like you needed to? Yeah. I think that's always the case. So I guess the answer is a little bit of both, right? But it's not because we're taking the approach to be vanilla or conservative. It's just based on what you think you have to do in that game to be successful.
I'm really going to need your help on this one, Nate, because when he says a bit of both, and he's like, I'm not saying he's talking out both sides of his mouth, because I understand he's basically saying what we've said here on the show about how teams prepare in these non-conference games. At the same time, like, there is more smoke to, hey, maybe this isn't the Penn State offense we're going to see this week. How did you take that particular comment?
Yeah. When he says you prepare to do the thing, and I'm already butchering it, but when you're preparing to do the things that you're going to need to beat the team that you're playing, is that right? Is that a good paraphrase? You're preparing for those things, the things that you think are necessary to beat the opponent that you're playing. The portion that he's leaving out, right? The continuation of that sentence is you don't need a whole lot to beat Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova offensively.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the necessity that he's not wrong. I think there's an earnestness to what he's saying about how you approach every game. You're not thinking to yourself, man, boy, we might need this, right? This would be a great play to use against Villanova, but we can't run it because then Oregon will see it, and that's no good. It is, hey, here are the things that we know will work, or we know can have an effectiveness against the defenses that we're going to see this week. And that they have done that to varying degrees of success. I will remain on board and on the train because he said it and has said it dozens of times that they wanted to work on things in the first 3 games of the season. Like, he said it again yesterday. About establishing this rapport between Drew Aller and those 3 specific receivers. The inverse of the depth emphasis that they had at basically every other position on the field, specifically on defense.
And also at the de-emphasis of other positions in the passing game. I think if they didn't have to in the game against FIU, they probably wouldn't. They probably would not have pivoted so hard to throwing the ball to the tight ends, or at least in the underneath passing game, because they had been at an emphasis, again, as you mentioned, working on specifically, from what I've seen, deep passing plays to get Devontae Ross involved in the offense. So even the selection of the plays and the selection of the routes on the plays feels like they were influenced by some of these things.
Yeah.
You scare the crap out of me every time you don't respond. Like, is it me? Can he like smell? Does he not like me? Can he not smell me through the camera? Like, what's going on? Do I smell bad?
You did the research. You did more work on this than I did, but the route tree and the passes that Drew Aller has thrown, I think shows an intentional limitation, right? A restrictor. What do they call it? Is that what it is?
Restrictor plate. I think so. I know nothing about NASCAR, but yeah. So here,
it's golf carts too, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? Is it like on the? Oh. Huh. Well, anyway, the majority of Aller's targets have been essentially on just 2 routes, and that is wild. Like, I went back and I looked at his route distribution the year prior, and then I also, just for comparison, looked at what Dante Moore has done this year in an I wouldn't say equally soft, but somewhat equally soft schedule. They did play Northwestern, which was a bit of a test for them for a little bit of that game. It's just very narrow. And part of this is, I guess this is my question is, we've seen that Drew Aller before. We've seen the guy who throws 1 or 2 routes until week 5 against Northwestern, and suddenly Northwestern is sitting on all those routes and Penn State's not getting free, easy access yards. what version of this offense is it? Are they working on that specifically because it's like timing and precision, or are they working on that because it's specifically the receiver routes, or is there just this is something somebody asked me yesterday on a podcast, Rust Belt Rundown, and I was like, what are they good at? If these are the things they're working on, what are they good at that they don't feel like they need to work on? We haven't seen any of that. And that is just, I think, obscuring a lot of what we would know by this point about an offense, even in the context of where this team played in the first month of the season or first 3-4 weeks of the season.
I'm just going to go back to what I did right before we came on, which was watch last year's Oregon game. And that Drew Aller and that passing game looked markedly different from the one that we are currently or have so far watched. Is some of that a symptom of getting it on the same page with Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross coming back from injury, and Trevor Pena? Sure, I think partly, but I also just think that they haven't needed to do the thing that Andy Koldenicki is supposed to be so good at, which is having an answer for everything and having an opportunity to, put a lot of eye candy out there and, just keep defenses off balance. I don't think that they've needed to necessarily do that. And I do think so maybe they're actually a train wreck. Like that's sure. Maybe I guess I recognize so many of the same players from last year's game to this year's, absent Tyler Warren, that it doesn't
add up. It doesn't add up to why. And there have been some clunky things, I think, from the offensive line. That's fair to say that they weren't coming out hot to start the season. There's been some clunky things from the receivers where they have not been as sharp as you would hope for seniors in their final season. There's so much there that we've already discussed. Here's the thing they do need to do, as James Franklin outlined in his press conference. Our last thing we're going to talk about here on Between the Lines, and we're getting into the breakdown, talk about the actual game, is the opposite of what we just talked about.
Tendencies are a good thing. If you have tendencies, that means you're good at things. And what you want to try to do is have enough of those tendency breakers to give people pause. I think those things are really important. And then obviously the other thing that's going to be, I think, critical in this game is starting fast. This is a team that has started fast pretty much, for the last couple of years. And that's going to be important in this game. You look at some of the games like last year where that didn't happen for them. It changes things significantly. So starting fast is going to be really important for both our offense and defense.
Nate, what do you take from that particular comment? I know that there's probably not a lot of nuance or digging in there, but I just felt like that was a very important comment in yesterday's conversation.
Yeah, I did too. I see it kind of two ways. One, they started fast against Ohio State, and that didn't really go anywhere for them. So it's not as though that's the only elixir for Penn State. Right. They have to sustain. You can start fast, but you got to sustain.
Yeah.
And that has been an issue, I think, in certain games. But the other side of that is, that if it, like direct reference to Oregon last year, Oregon got off to a great start and Penn State didn't. Penn State left with a field goal on its first possession. And that was a 28-17 game at one point, 28-10 game, right? Like Oregon got out considerably ahead of Penn State after Aller threw the pick almost 6. So Penn State needs to be it's so stupid, but like it needs to be its best self for the whole game. And that's
the point of these big games. That's the point of these big game matchups. This is when you test all of the things you're worried about. So Penn State fans worried about linebacker depth, worried about, is there a tight end one? What happened to Tyler Warren, in his absence? All those things you're worried about. these are where you're going to find out more and more and more about the team, because there's another team on the other side that can challenge you. And I wrote about this yesterday, Nate. His comment was perfectly aligned with what did Jim Knowles do in the Rose Bowl that was so much better than he did in Week 7 when they lost in Eugene. Yep. Yeah, I went through all the changes in the defense. And here's the secret. It was kind of the same game plan, but Ohio State turned the Oregon defense into a purple mist on the road. They hit them like a deer in November, and it was just ugly. They put up 24 points in the first 4 drives or something like that. It was wild, the difference in the scoring between one and the other. And yes, part of that is getting 3 and outs or getting stops on the defensive side, but scoring touchdown, like come out and punch him in the face several times. And now the Oregon defense, if you take away those deep plays, the Oregon offense kind of become a dink and dunk offense. Like they run the ball and they throw screens if they don't have that vertical offense part of their offense. So yeah, starting fast, like that's the key for the defense as well. And that's Franklin's point there to me, is that's kind of where this game is going to hinge on how they start, and that's going to set the tone. And by the way, keep the crowd in the game, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't know that this team is also built to come from behind. I'm not sure that that's the best version of what this Penn State team can be. It's not saying that they can't. I think there's a passing game for Penn State that's better than what they've shown so far. And I think that they can keep defenses off balance enough to mix it up. And I mean, you've seen the 2-minute stuff that Penn State has had success with. So yeah, that's out there. I just think that they, feel strongly or believe in this idea of being a ball control offense that can beat you, multiple ways for sure, but also is one that obviously they want to play the game on their terms, but the game on their terms looks a lot like getting a lead and then suffocating you to death.
Yeah. Let's talk about maybe what that plan is going to be in the whiteout. 2025 whiteout is finally here. So we're going to preview the game and give you a breakdown of some of the areas that I think is going to give Penn State an opportunity to win the game. So that's kind of the goal here, is it's not just that the doom and gloom is coming and that Oregon is going to destroy Penn State in this game, because it feels like a lot of times when we're talking about here are the challenges or here what this team that's 3-0 and number 3 in this country is going to face, like it sounds like we're saying, oh, well, they're going to lose. So Nate, I want to get your general thoughts on Oregon, and then I'll just kind of pop through some of the things I've seen on film and give you some of my assessments of where I think Penn State has an advantage in this particular game. So what were your observations of what you've seen of Oregon so far?
That their receivers are open a lot, right?
Yeah.
And the quarterback reminds me a lot. Rich Garcelle asked yesterday about the differences between Moore and Dylan Gabriel, and Franklin said, I think a lot of the same. And I think that's pretty much it. He can run and will run. Moore will run. Sadiq is still really good. It's easy to forget that he kind of steamrolled Penn State in the first half of that game last year, jumped over somebody. They continue to be an offensive team that can beat you in a variety of ways, and one that will just undeniably give Penn State its toughest test that Penn State has seen. I mean, I've made this point a couple of times now, but the best offense that Penn State's defense has seen is Penn State's offense, and Penn State's offense has not been that great so far.
And it certainly doesn't have the profile of what Oregon does in terms of James Franklin. One of the clips that I almost put in here and what James Franklin said yesterday is that when you have an offense, when you're facing an offense that has multiple receivers that threaten you deep, it changes what you can do on defense. It puts you in a certain position where you have to do things to prevent those big plays. And Penn State has maybe one of those deep threat receivers that hasn't been clicking so far, and has also been banged up and not really part of the picture for a good bit of the summer in camp. So yeah, that's a certain aspect of this game for sure.
Yeah, it's Where do you want to move next to, Frank? What's the because I know that you think maybe there's an opportunity against their defensive line to maybe have some success.
Yeah, they haven't been playing great. Here's the interesting thing is, again, what are they doing and what are they not doing on the defensive line? One thing that I know that they like to do is stem the front from a 3-down to a 4-down front because they've got the big bodies to do that, or vice versa. So they have a lot of versatile defensive linemen, guys that are 290 that play on the edge, guys that are 275 that can play a couple of different positions, and then their defensive tackles are massive. 330 is the norm in that defensive tackle room, but really, Franklin, I think, highlighted Amari Washington yesterday as like the defensive tackle that stands out to them. They've got a couple of guys, including players that have started. 50, I think Gray is his last name. 6'6", 330. Not necessarily playing like that. Tall, younger player, and I think that being young in the trenches is part of this. And they have not done as much of their movement pre-snap to confuse Penn State or whatever offensive line. But generally, that is an area where I think Penn State had an advantage in the last game. Andy Kotelnicki had a great game plan to do a lot of things to blunt the advantage of having a first-round defensive tackle who made a difference for the Steelers, by the way, when he came back and started playing in the NFL this week. In the trenches, they haven't been exceptional so far, and I think that's an area where Penn State and Andy Kotelnicki, his bag is the run game. My concern would be they used some surprise changes, the little tweaks that made a big difference against Oregon last year. What is now the second iteration? What's the second volley in this battle back and forth between Dan Lanning and a very good defensive front and a good defensive scheme and something that's very tough to defend, and Andy Kotelnicki? Does he have enough? Are there enough things in the bag that they haven't done yet or that they can do that will give them another advantage in the run game? Because I think schematically from the offensive line, they have the size, the speed, and the athleticism to take it to those guys who have not been strong against the run so far this year, especially those defensive tackles.
What about just based on, again, last year, but Tyler Warren was a huge piece of that game last year. And generally speaking, in the passing game, the middle of the field was, and this is anecdotal, but open a lot.
Yeah. So,
what opportunities do you see there for Penn State?
So that is something that I think they've tried to address. They saw that last year, so they got some different safeties. The safety from Purdue is athletic, smart, explosive, and can cover a lot of ground to make up for some of those deficiencies. They had poor safety play, a lot of mental bust mistakes. They've got more athleticism there. So I think that's an area where they can now contend with Penn State, which is why those receivers are so important in this game. And I think that's a big wild card. One of the things they could have a massive advantage in this game is Andy Kotelnicki versus young cornerbacks. Does everyone, this is not the recruiting show, but does everyone remember Brandon Finney, the borderline 5-star corner at McDonough that Penn State wanted? We said, like, he's going to be a Penn State Nittany Lion. All the things point to him being a Penn State Nittany Lion. And then he went on a trip to Oregon and suddenly he's a Duck. He's starting for them. So he's, just a refresher, 6'4", runs a 100-meter dash like a gazelle, and is a really athletic corner. But he's a true freshman playing in his fifth game. Is he ready against Andy Kotelnicki? And here's the other thing, like senior wide receivers. Whatever he is, Kyron Hudson is a senior. Like he should, from a positional understanding and understanding how to take advantage of a cornerback, he should have a deep knowledge of how to get open. The other corner, by the way, is a redshirt freshman. So they've got a young, unbelievably talented players on the outside that I think are not tested. So that could be a massive advantage for Penn State. But that passing game, they poured all their time and energy into getting Trevor Pena and Kyron Hudson on the same page with Drew Aller for a moment like this. Because if you can't take that Tyler Warren route and go over the middle with the running backs, you need to take advantage of those corners. There have been some mental busts. They have made some mistakes. They have not been penalized for it because they haven't faced quarterbacks and receivers that are good enough to take advantage of that. Have they cleaned things up enough, similar to the Penn State passing game? Who has the advantage there? And I think that's a wild card. But Penn State's the older team here. The theme here is defensive tackles, young. Receivers, young. Corners, they're also young. There's a lot of guys starting for the first time on this defense and on this offense. They're going into the whiteout game. Penn State's the older team. And I know this is kind of a lame general sweeping thing, but Penn State should have an advantage in this game because they're at home and they're the veteran squad. There are things in this game that are going to come up that neither team has put on film. We've established that. However much it is however much it is. We don't know. But it's those surprise moments that Penn State has to take advantage of where, oh no, you saw something you haven't seen before, you reacted poorly, and now the other player has a step. Whether it's the running backs exploding through a hole, receivers catching the ball, the quarterback hitting the target, all those things, if you're the senior team, you should be taking advantage of those, not being taken advantage of. And so I think, going from 1 to 2, those are two massive advantages for Penn State, but they've got to actually capitalize in those moments with their passing game, especially against those young corners.
So this is more likely a Penn State's receivers being open than a winning contested catches situation for the best case Penn State.
I think in the best case scenario, yes, there should be some open plays. Now, it's not like it's going to be every play, but there should be some open plays. There should be open receivers. And if it is a contested catch situation, I think that probably might. It could be an advantage for Oregon because of their size and length. Kyron Hudson has to be that dude in contested catch situations. Trevor Pena has had a couple drops. That's not typical for him. That can't happen in this game. Those mistakes that were causing attrition in the offense, they can't happen in this game. And those are outside of, getting comfortable with your quarterback. That's just get open and catch the football. That's kind of like baseline expectation for receivers. The other thing I think in this particular game is Penn State has an advantage in pass protection, which is a massive situation. I know Oregon has a couple of high-profile tackles they got in the portal, but I don't know that they're the same guys that they had last year. I was talking to somebody in the NFL who was talking about, like, these guys, even NFL scouts are like, yeah, Oregon took a step back in the trenches this year. So Penn State did not. And I think in terms of who gets pressure on the quarterback, another matchup sort of thing, Penn State should have a big advantage of having their offensive line return and having those guys protecting a quarterback who is also good in those situations when he has to move. Like, I think people haven't given Aller enough credit for his ability to throw on the run and move and make decisions like that. But he's been really good in these games, in these big moments of finding the guy to throw the ball to, directly under pressure. Whether it's ambient pressure, the big moment pressure, that's not what we're talking about. Actually, physically, somebody's about to tackle him. He's been good at avoiding sacks.
Yeah, he did that quite a bit last year. That was kind of a hallmark, was escaping those sacks and I don't know. I just saw general toughness out of him in that game, resiliency maybe. So
yeah, to make mistakes and not fold. We've made a lot of that this first 3 weeks of the season of Aller's posture on the sideline and what we see from him as he sits down on the bench. In the game against Oregon, when it mattered, he made some bad mistakes and kept throwing the football. And that was my biggest thing throughout the beginning of the season when Penn State fans were mad at Aller. And I'm like, look at the decisions he's making. He's being more aggressive this year. Let's reward that. If we're going to do stuff here and we're all going to have a social reaction to Drew Aller, let's not kill the guy for trying to do the thing we've been asking him to do for 2 straight years, because he is doing it in this offense of throwing up jump balls to Kyron Hudson or throwing the ball deep to Devontae Ross. The thing I would say is, like, Penn State's pass protection has been surprisingly poor in the non-conference season. They're capable of more, but I don't know what it is. Drew Shelton, I thought, was going to have a really, really good year, and he's had some really bad mental busts where he's just allowed guys to get pressure and sacks that he should not. And these are not like in obvious passing situations. I guess that's the part, is in obvious passing situations when the chips are down, I think the offensive line is absolutely going to pass protect. But it's like they've had some mental busts here and there that I wasn't expecting, but we've seen them play really well. And Oregon's pass, here's the other thing, like we're talking about pass protection. Oregon has these power defensive ends. They're all 270, 265. They're bigger guys. At least they're starters, the guys that are going to be on the field a lot. They do have some smaller guys that can be blitz and be aggressive and, maybe have a little more speed. But the bulk of their passing attack, their pass rush, are physical, not speed. And I think that's to Penn State's advantage. They were able to handle it in the last game, And that's including a guy who I think is the best defensive tackle I've seen in the Big Ten in a while in Derek Harmon. They should have the opportunity here. Isaiah Worlds is not as powerful as I thought he was going to be. He's very tall and he's kind of narrow from the waist down. He does not have the anchor or the power in the run game that we were expecting to see in the first 4 games of the season. And then Alex Harkey, their right tackle, he might be better overall, and he is an absolute mauler in the run game. I've seen him take a guy one-handed and like swat. It's like a swat. Just throw him into a different gap. So he's got power behind his hands, but he shows some weaknesses in pass protection, where I think Penn State's defensive ends can take advantage of it, where he's giving up kind of a soft corner. You might be able to bend the edge on those guys. And Penn State's pass rush is, I don't want to say surprisingly effective, but there was a big concern about the lack of an Abdul Carter or a Chop Robinson. I think the pass rush has been effective so far. So, that's kind of in a nutshell, the pass protection conversation, where I think Penn State has an advantage there. They should have that in this game, including the noise, because when you're on the road, a silent count is the advantage for the defense. So if we're talking about pressure on the quarterback, Penn State should be able to prevent more than they give up.
If we're tail of the taping this, I'm doing the mental math right now. Potential Penn State advantage offensive line versus their defensive line. Potential advantage Penn State receivers versus their cornerbacks. Penn State defense versus Oregon's offense. Push?
It depends on where we are on the field. I think the corners can hang with the receivers from a style and an athletic standpoint. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Oregon's receivers, but this is, as Nate, as you pointed out, in the preseason, Penn State's very high in their corners. And they haven't been tested this year, but this is a borderline elite unit. I think the starters as well, Davian Collins, A.J. Harris, they have the combination of skills to handle those offensive threats. My concern would be in the run game. I think Penn State's defensive line can handle the run most of the time. But if there are some leaks, like if Zane Durant has to hold a double team and he might get pushed out of the hole, out of the gap, is Amari Campbell ready to fill that and make him right? Is Tony Rojas ready to get some TFLs because he's seeing things and playing as fast as possible? James Franklin talked about there's another level of speed in this defense we haven't seen yet because they're still getting used to it. But I think a lot comes down to the defensive line. They're going to have to do a lot in this game, and that's what happened in the game in the Rose Bowl. Is that defensive line for Ohio State? They were able to control Oregon's line of scrimmage, and then the linebackers and safeties could flow and tackle. Penn State doesn't necessarily have the same size as Ohio State had last year on the interior. I think Zane Durant can do it, but it might have to look different, and that's where it's an unknown to me, is how they're going to play that particular part of the game, because if you can control their run game with your linebackers and your defensive line and keep your safeties deep, you have now taken away what makes Oregon special, because you creep up into the box to stop the run game and suddenly they start throwing one-on-one balls deep against you, and that's when they start to create stress. It's that night and day black and white of short, deep in their passing game, which is like a lot of spread offenses, right? They don't do anything particularly tricky in the passing game. So Penn State has to be able to control the box with those 6 players primarily. Other than that, I do think Penn State has an advantage from an age and a home field perspective.
Who gets Sadiq?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a combination of Rojas and Wheatley. I would be concerned with other players taking him. Now, on third down, I have a theory that they're going to use A.J. Harris in dime situations to cover Kenyon Sadiq, because they've done that previously, moving him into that nickel position or into a dime position. So on high leverage downs, I think it might be A.J. Harris when you put your other 2 good corners on the outside and allow them to play, an important role, but then doubling the middle of the field, taking away Sadiq. I think that might be kind of a job by committee. And the guys it has to be Zakee Wheatley, Tony Rojas, A.J. Harris. I don't know that it's advantage Oregon if those other players in the secondary or in that second level of the defense are matched up with him in space one-on-one.
I thought Franklin's answer about the other safety spot was telling yesterday in ways that kind of the inverse of the Singleton Catron conversation. Like it's King Mac, right? Like that's where they're going. They want older guys in this game. They know that they need that experience and that know-how in these situations and that maturity, right? It doesn't downplay Lane, or Belgrave Shorter. It's just, hey, that's where they're going.
Yeah. And he's been the most consistent, right? So I think I've talked about this before on the show, where his ability to play one position in the offseason and suddenly shift over and join the competition late. I think part of what we've seen is like he joined the competition late because he was playing the nickel at one point, and suddenly now he's back in the safety room, and then he just worked his way to a position where he's now the starter. And I guess the part where I would be concerned with King Mac that we haven't seen yet, he's going to be good in the run. He's going to be an enforcer coming downhill towards the ball. Historically, when he was at Alabama and the times we actually get to see him play in coverage, playing in deep coverage, he's looked less comfortable. But he was at a different position then. So I have a strong confidence he's going to be able to handle it. But do you trust Belgrave Shorter and Lane in this game? I guess that's the question too, is do you trust those younger guys in this particular matchup? One last thing I want to get to here was something you wrote, and I want to get you back into the conversation on this with the Penn State offense. I think is kind of going to be where we go. A bye-week checkup. You did this, again, for the Blue White Illustrated magazine, which you can catch. It's on stores and it's on shelves now in downtown State College. You can see it and go buy it at the student bookstore and, of course, online, bluewhiteonline.com. You wrote about the offense in kind of a offensive checkup through the first month of the season. And I wanted to highlight a couple of the conversations. Going back to Nick Singleton. Yep. Please read for me the quote that I pulled out of your article that he gave recently about how he's performed so far.
Well, specifically, the question was about his involvement in the passing game and whether or not he felt that he would be more involved to this point in the season than he has been. And he said, quote, "I'm getting there. This is all stuff we're not going to show. Obviously, these past 3 games, I feel like the following week when we go up to Oregon, we're going to show more stuff and all that. But right now, no. I know it's going to happen soon."
I mean,
seems to lend itself to a certain sentiment.
It's not breadcrumbs. There are full-on, there's panko breading all over the place of like, hey guys, this isn't the end of the Penn State offense. There's just so much evidence that, like, yeah, we're not doing everything, and it's, even in the run game. One of the things I forgot to mention in the past conversation is I do think Cage Ron Allen can be more of a focus in the run game, early in the game specifically. The option game, haven't done almost any of that in terms of other players taking snaps under center. I do wonder who that might be, but the option game, including the RPO, they have really not got into the RPO. Aller running more in this situation. All these things are on the table. All these things, like Nick Singleton has pointed out, there's stuff we're not going to do in the first 3 games. That might be a thing we see in the next couple
excuse.
of... Yes, exactly. I would like to...
He has 5 receptions for 44 yards, just for the record.
Yeah.
The first quarter of the season. I feel very strongly that that's a number that's going to go up.
I think, yeah, given the matchups in this game and what they probably want to do, yeah, absolutely. I would like to critique Devontae Ross's usage patterns, so please read for me the part I have given you here. You're setting me up to just go off on this, but I want to get your thoughts on this too.
Wait, what do you want me to ask you? You there's a couple of notes here.
Yeah. So the middle part, I just highlighted it for you. Please read that.
Okay. Finding positives while lamenting some drop balls. Franklin hoped to elicit a combined effort. Oh, is this for me? I wrote this.
Yes, you wrote this. Yes, that's it. Yes, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Finding positives while lamenting some drop balls, Franklin hoped to elicit a combined effort that hadn't yet materialized for the group through the non-conference slate. And can I expand on this just for a moment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, they just haven't all played well at the same time.
Yes. And I have a reason for that in my opinion, but give me a little more of your thought on that.
Well, no, I mean, the one thing that I thought was super important, and I don't have the number right in front of me right now, is just how heavy the reps and the targets have been to those three guys in particular. And they have all had moments, but the consistency that they're counting on and expecting out of the three of them together has not materialized to this point in the season.
And I feel like there's a reason. So I'm trying to pull up those stats to give you credit for having this particular. Now, in terms of targets, Kyron Hudson, 20 targets. Trevor Pena, 20 targets. Those guys are leading the team. Now, Luke Reynolds with 16 is third. Devontae Ross has 7 targets so far. I would say if you're talking about getting, and James Franklin talked about trying to get Devontae Ross going, he's got 7 targets so far this season. 3 of them have been deep targets. His average depth of target, meaning where is Aller throwing him the ball on the field, 22 yards down the field. Everybody knows that's coming. That's, to me, the issue is like they want to get that element and that facet of the offense going. They want to get that deep passing going. They want to establish that as a threat so that Oregon sees that on film. But he's not the same athlete as Amari Evans who can just win any foot race. And he needs, I think, a little more schematic help. 3 of his 7 targets deep is not giving him enough opportunity to be a threat in that he has 0 targets on intermediate passes. And at a certain point, like you do have the basketball thing, Nate, of everyone's got a role, and you want your shooters to shoot, you want your drivers to drive at the basket, you want your guys to rebound. But if you're doing just one thing, like we saw even Amari Evans last year was not an overall holistically healthy and productive receiver because he had one job. And when he tried to do other things, it didn't go well. I think Ross can do other things. The problem is now we're talking about target distribution. And if you take all those targets, 20, 20, and then 12 to Ross, now you're taking even more away from those backs and tight ends. So I don't know how to fix this problem, but I do think that this has been for me, this has been a frustration watching this offense this year. It's like, oh, Devontae Ross, deep shot, play action. Everybody knows it's coming.
Part of the targets conversation though is like Ross basically didn't play. Like he played, but he didn't really play in that first game.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit why that's messed up. Question: I know you hate special teams. Why is Devontae Ross the punt returner?
Because his biggest strength is elusiveness, and if you're a punt returner, it's less about straight line speed and tackle breaking. It's more about making people miss. That's, in my opinion, what a punt returner is.
Has that skill set been used yet as a receiver?
Just a little bit. They got the ball in his hands on a reverse, but no. In general, no, it has not.
So you would think.
Yeah, I would think it's got to be coming at some point. Yeah. Last thing here, and I'll read this one for you and then ask you this final question because I want to give you the last thing here. Tyser Denmark looked like a guy who could be very hungry to play and get on the field and make a difference, Franklin said. Guys like that, I don't know when it's going to be, but his number is going to be called at some point and he's going to be ready. Penn State fans want more explosiveness out of this passing game. I think that's valid, given we just talked about Devontae Ross is the deep target. Is Tyser Denmark the explosive threat everybody wants him to be? Is that the fix in this offense? Is it Kobe Howard? Is that going to fix the offense from a passing perspective? What are your thoughts on this in what we've seen so far?
No.
Same. I think it's perfect.
Listen, I gotta go back to one thing that I do think is somewhat relevant here. I don't think the offense is broken. That's and maybe it is. Like I could be wrong. I don't know. Right? Like certainly, I guess there's that chance that they forgot how to do all the things that they were really good at last year, or maybe that Tyler Warren absence just changes things that dramatically, or maybe not having Trey Wallace changes things that dramatically. I just don't think so. I don't. Right? I generally see a slight upgrade in the receivers that maybe hasn't come to fruition quite yet. I think that Luke Reynolds is going to be and is a reliable playmaking target in the passing game that is in the mold of what Tyler Warren was to the passing game last year. Not necessarily all the other things that Tyler Warren did, but certainly from the passing game perspective, a piece that Penn State can use moving forward. And I think the running backs are the same behind an offensive line that, has room to grow. I really truly believe that the offense itself, among all the other stuff that we've already been talking about, in terms of what they've done, what they haven't done, saving, blah, 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 blah. I think that 6 more explosive plays over 3 games would make everyone feel quite a bit different than how they currently feel right now.
I would agree
literally
with that
2 a game.
wholeheartedly.
Literally 2 a game.
Oh, yeah.
Do they have to do it? Yes. And let's just full circle this the whole way. Why am I up for today? Right? Like why was I excited about today more than last week's show? More than right? Because the moment calls for it. And like this idea that human nature hasn't impacted these guys in some respect. Like, do you want to play your best all the time? Of course. But is it a little bit different? Yeah. Bill O'Brien told this great story in the past about what the locker room looked like before the Super Bowl for the Patriots. Right? Guys like snorting smelling salts, like cocaine, right? Just like raw.
I was gonna be careful there, Nate. You got to say allegedly at this point, I think.
Point being, it's different. Is this the Super Bowl? No. But is this a game that every single player Penn State has been waiting for 9 months? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be different. We'll see, the extent that they can turn it on. But yeah, that's the difference in human nature that I'm expecting this week.
I wanted to get to this conversation of if they win, if they lose with you, because I think it's a fascinating one. We don't have enough time for that today, unfortunately. I do want to get to a couple things here. Larry mentioned this. We kind of talked about it, but he says, how's the Oregon offensive line with 3 new transfers going to hold up against the defense and noise of the whiteout? That is a massive advantage for Penn State. Agree. Yeah, I think it's a massive advantage in their pass protection in the matchup there. Sean says, thank you. Nate, he says, thank you, Nate. He wants you specifically to know. You're doing a great job. And then Steven says, same thing. Looking forward to the rest of the week. Steven, perfect. The rest of the week, what's coming up is tomorrow. Guys that need to step up on Penn State's team. Players for Penn State to win this game, I think critical areas where these players need to play better than they have so far for Penn State to get that win. So we're going to give you some specific areas and names of guys where I think they need to step up in their game. And of course, coming up this weekend, 3 hours before kickoff, so tailgate show at 4:30. You can check us out live if you want to come to outside the Bryce Jordan Center ticket office, in front of the Bryce Jordan Center ticket office next to Beaver Stadium for the Penn State football tailgate show. Again, that's airing at 4:30. James Franklin's press conference coming up tomorrow. We'll have that here on the YouTube channel. And, of course, we'll have our reactions over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Haven't even mentioned we got a new deal. We're going to be giving that to you on the way out here, but I'll just talk to the podcast audience who aren't going to see the visuals. You can subscribe right now, $52 for the first year, and get a full year of access to The Athletic. You're not just getting it, like that's 2 deals all up in one. That's awesome. So check it out. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Nate Bauer, all his great stuff there as well. Thank you for your time today. Great conversation. We'll be back with myself and Greg Pickle tomorrow here on the BWI Live Show.